Anger directed towards National City Police and a call for answers after a man dies following an arrest. A byproduct of war becomes a long-term health hazard. Now a Southern California congressman wants to do something about the military's burn pits.
We don't have enough capacity to treat the volumes that we've seen continue to increase.
A strain on the system. Local hospitals are having a hard time treating those who go to the ER for mental health emergencies.
It started about 5 years ago with the design and trying to get together all of the requirements that would take to build a facility, a state-of-the-art facility like this one.
And a look at the new animal shelter for pets in East County. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. A South Bay family is demanding answers tonight in the death of a man who was injured while in custody of National City Police. Earl McNeil's family rallied at the police department today. KPBS reporter Jade Hyman has the story.
Well, family and community members want to see all video the National City Police Department has in this case. As you can see, they took their demand straight to the police department today. Now officers have responded by releasing a statement on what they say happened to Earl McNeil. Family members tell us he died June 11th after doctors requested they take him off life support. They say this all started May 26th when McNeil, who suffered from bipolar disorder, walked into the police station looking for help and ended up with brain damage so severe he was in a coma on life support. A statement from National City Police says when McNeil came to the station, he was agitated, made irrational statements, and acted paranoid. When they arrested him for suspicion of being under the influence of a controlled substance, they say he then became combative and they found a controlled substance on him, at which point they then put him in a restraining device called a wrap. Police say during transport to the county jail, he was intentionally hurting himself. They say during intake, he showed signs of medical distress. When paramedics arrived, he stopped breathing. Though they were able to resuscitate him, family members say he remained in a coma at UC San Diego Medical Center where he died. Family spokesperson Tasha Williamson says his injuries don't add up.
And we're trying to figure out how come he has bruising on his head, how he has scrapes on the side of his face, how he has bruising on his head, all around his head, how he has missing pieces of hair, small particles of hair that is missing from his head. How did those injuries happen? How come his wrists are cut, which appears to have been that there was something that was too tight. His hands are completely swollen. His arms are swollen. That happens when there is an excessive force. That does not happen when there is a restraint.
And as you can see in this video, the device officers placed McNeil in restrains the hands, feet, and legs. This video is straight from the manufacturer, who says it is used to de-escalate without restricting breathing. National City Police say they are conducting an investigation and review of this incident, along with the District Attorney's Office, FBI, and U.S. Department of Justice. An autopsy is underway. Jade Hyman, KPBS News.
Republicans in Congress are planning votes on immigration next week that could impact the status of so-called dreamers. Two bills will be up for consideration. One is from hardline conservatives that would allow those who are brought to the U.S. as children to stay in the country legally. It would also focus on border security. A second bill from moderate Republicans would create a path to citizenship and add new limits to legal immigration. House Speaker Paul Ryan is fast-tracking these bills because some Republicans were working with Democrats to force a vote on other immigration bills that had bipartisan support. Speaker Ryan says President Donald Trump is backing his approach.
This is an effort to bring our caucus together, our conference together on immigration. I'm very pleased with our members. What happened was our members got together, spoke with one another, and compromised with each other so that we could find a way forward without exercising a discharge petition, which would mean we would never make law. And so now what we have is an actual chance at making law in solving this problem.
Speaker Ryan also said one of the bills could include funding for President Trump's border wall proposal. So far, Congress has only approved money for prototypes and replacement of existing structures. A plan to split California into 3 states will be on the November ballot. Under the plan, San Diego and Orange counties would be part of the newly created Southern California. It would include Central Valley and Inland Empire. Northern California would include San Francisco, while California would include Los Angeles and much of the Central Coast.
State into 3 different parts isn't going to solve a problem. It's going to magnify it times 3. It's going to cost taxpayers billions and trillions of dollars. It sets up 3 different new bureaucracies, and it doesn't even tackle issues like how are people in Southern California going to get their water or energy, because that's all now split up among the 3 different states.
The ballot measure is led by a Silicon Valley investor who says California's diverse economy and population make it nearly ungovernable. If voters approve the measure, the ultimate decision would be made by Congress. More than 1 million people sought help at San Diego County Hospital emergency rooms last year. A large portion of those visits were people experiencing mental health crisis. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy tells us the growing patient load is straining the region's resources.
On a typical day in San Diego County's emergency rooms, dozens of people suffering a psychiatric crisis come for help.
We don't have enough capacity to treat the volumes that we've seen continue to increase.
Demetrius Alexio is president and CEO of the Hospital Association of San Diego and Imperial Counties. He says last year, nearly 45,000 people suffering a severe psychiatric episode came through emergency departments for treatment. It's about 5% more than the year before. He says the soaring caseloads are causing ER gridlock because patients are typically put on a 3-day hold for evaluation, known as a 5150. And often, the patients, who can be a threat to themselves and others, spend all 3 days in the ER.
When we look at the issue, we, on average, probably have about 40 to 50 patients per day who are sitting in hospital emergency departments on a 5150 hold, where they're either waiting for 72 hours to pass to treat the psychiatric episode, or they're waiting for an inpatient bed, which most of those beds countywide are full.
Alexio says many hospitals have psychiatric units, and the region has approximately 650 inpatient psychiatric beds, but it's insufficient to meet the demand.
For the most part, as soon as those beds open up, they pretty much are filled.
He says there's also a lack of step-down care for people to recuperate.
So some need, shorter fix, some need just outpatient treatment where they could go back home, but they just need some treatment over time to manage their condition within the community. So there's different levels.
Alexio says his association will continue to work with county leaders and service providers to add more resources and keep emergency rooms moving. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Veterans groups are urging Congress in the VA to do more to recognize the potential health threat burn pits may have had on troops serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
The military burned everything from car batteries to computer parts to human waste in Iraq and Afghanistan. The VA has not found a connection, but veterans groups have been saying some vets have developed a range of illnesses related to their exposure to burn pits. Several groups spoke recently before a House committee that included Congressman Raul Ruiz of California.
Burden of proof should be on the VA to prove that it was not associated with burn pits. So right now, when you have a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old coming down with esophageal cancer or brain cancer with no other risk factors and they're being worked up, then they should get the care at the VA.
Ruiz has formed a burn pit caucus to reach a bipartisan consensus on legislation. A bill was introduced to require the VA to conduct a more in-depth study, but Ruiz thinks the VA should start treating vets who show symptoms now.
And we don't have the time to do a 10, 15, 20-year study that's going to be able to capture all of the different types of delayed manifestations of these illnesses, because we have veterans right now that are dying or that are becoming permanently disabled.
In 2014, the VA set up a burn pit registry for post-9/11 veterans to share any symptoms they believe they've experienced. So far, 141,000 vets have signed up. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump returns to Washington, but questions mount after the summit with North Korea. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The member associations of Canada, Mexico, and USA have been selected by the FIFA Congress to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup.
For the first time, 3 nations will unite to host a World Cup. The U.S., Mexico, and Canada were awarded the 2026 World Cup today by soccer's governing body. By then, the World Cup will expand to 48 countries. The U.S. last hosted the World Cup in 1994 and Mexico in 1970. Canada hosted the Women's World Cup in 2015. Ramadan ends this week for Muslims around the world. For a Syrian immigrant in Washington, D.C., working as a chef during this time can be a challenge. AP reporter Noreen Nasser has a story.
It is 4 a.m. at Union Kitchen in Washington, D.C., and Majid Abdurrahim is well on his way, preparing a meal for 150 people. But first, a few last sips of water.
4 minutes.
Abdurrahim won't eat or drink from dawn to sunset during the month of Ramadan, so the middle of the night is his busiest time.
The
reason is that kitchen work, the oven, the grill, it makes you thirsty. That kind of work while you're fasting is very difficult.
But the 29-year-old chef has faced far greater challenges, including having to rebuild his life. He worked in several restaurants in Syria before he fled the country in 2013 as it was being torn apart by war.
It's impossible for any Syrian to forget those days, to forget what Syria was and what it became.
He fled to Jordan, where he married his wife, another refugee. But life there was difficult.
Everything was hard in Jordan, especially with 2 kids. You don't have any assistance and you're not allowed to work.
When he got the opportunity to come to the U.S. in 2016 with his family, the presidential election was heating up, and so was rhetoric about immigrants and refugees.
I don't know, but Trump maybe not like refugee.
But Abdurrahim said when he arrived, something unexpected happened.
I was amazed that the first people I met on the street smiled at me without even knowing me.
After years of attempting to resettle, Abdurrahim soon had reason to smile himself. He found himself back in the kitchen working for a company called Foodini. Noobsa Philip Vang started the meal delivery service because he missed his mother's Laotian cooking. He also saw an opportunity to help other immigrant and refugee chefs.
People are aware of the situations that are abroad, but maybe they haven't really been able to even connect with a refugee or something like that. And I think what's really cool is we can kind of bridge those 2 worlds.
Customers say they get satisfaction from a good meal and a deeper understanding of stories like Abdurrahim's.
It's a win-win. I get his food, and I also can feel that I'm helping him through what must be just an incredibly difficult time.
Despite the struggles he's faced, Abdurrahim remains optimistic. He attributes that outlook to his daughters.
My daughters are the most valuable things in my life. They're still small, but I show them pictures and talk to them about Syria. I tell them about the places we've lived, and I hope I can visit with them one day.
In the meantime, he stays connected to those memories through his food. Noreen Nasser, The Associated Press.
An excessive heat warning in our deserts ends tonight as the weather cools a bit. Julie Wyden has details in tonight's forecast.
Good evening. The heat has been intense in the desert areas. That excessive heat warning continues until 8 o'clock this evening. I'm happy to say that it does look like we'll have a bit of a reduction in heat for Thursday, just a little bit. Then things will get a little bit better still as we move into Friday and the weekend. So I think that's when you'll start to feel a bit more in the way of relief. Dry sky continues around the San Diego area and around the entirety of our region. I think we'll all be feeling that cool down for the weekend to come. On satellite and radar right now, nothing to to show you in our neck of the woods. As we zoom out for you a little bit more still, you can see just how quiet it is all across California and even on into Nevada and the Four Corners states. So nothing really to discuss here for right now. As we move on into late Thursday and Friday, we will get tropical moisture from Bud to move its way into Arizona and New Mexico. And the moisture from that system will help enhance the humidity in our area. That's what's actually going to help prevent those temperatures in the deserts from soaring for Thursday night, for Friday and the weekend. Tonight we'll drop down to the mid-60s in San Diego. Temperatures are going to be feeling a little bit comfortable here. We'll be in the mid-50s in Ramona. Borrego Springs gets down to 76 degrees. Your forecast high for tomorrow up to 90 in Ramona, 75 San Diego, 77 degrees in Oceanside. Borrego Springs, like I mentioned, heat only breaking slightly. You'll still be in the triple digits. There comes that moisture as we get into the later part of the week. Again, that's what's going to help enhance the humidity. It should also increase the cloud cover in coastal zones, especially for your early morning hours. We'll be in the mid-70s on Friday at the coast, low 70s for the weekend. Inland areas will be in the 80s as we wrap up the weekend, 70s for the weekend. Mountain zones 60s for Saturday and Sunday, so quite a bit cooler here. And again, in the desert areas, that heat will especially break for Saturday and Sunday with highs in the low to mid-90s. Back to you, Ebony.
Our media partner, inewsource, wanted to know how San Diego's older buildings would stand up to the next big quake. So they took a tour with geologist Pat Abbott and answered readers' questions, including what's being done to minimize damage.
Well, we have a question here on Twitter it states that the Bay Area has had lots of earthquake retrofits after Loma Prieta. That was the 1989 earthquake. What steps have the city and county of San Diego taken to retrofit its buildings, bridges, and other infrastructure? Well, it's not only the city and county, but also the state. You mentioned bridges. Let's start with that one. You may have seen some of those things here in years as Caltrans has gone through and done retrofits on bridges. You can see the retrofits very distinctly. For example, the Interstate 805 bridge and on-ramps going across Mission Valley, significant amount of retrofits done there. We also have gone to things like passing laws like, for example, URMs, unreinforced masonry buildings, bricks and all. The state required each city to do an inventory of these buildings which are out of code, which are things that are liable to fail in an earthquake, and to take measures to make those buildings be retrofitted. Now, since they're owned by private individuals, there's a limit to how much you can insist on, but there's been a lot of pressure. The inventory of these URM buildings has gone down markedly in the last 15 years or so, and we still have a ways to go yet, but progress definitely is being made, and very frankly, I'm pleased with a lot of the progress I see. Not to say we're done. There's more I'd like to see done, but I'm very happy with the way things have gone in recent years in terms of fixing things up.
That's one of a series of videos produced by inewsource, which is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. You can see all of the videos at inewsource.org. Hundreds of stray animals have a new safe place to call a temporary home. The newly built El Cajon Animal Shelter is open and ready for people who want to adopt cats, dogs, or reptiles. KPBS reporter Jade Hyman has more.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Whether abused or neglected, every dog here has had its day. But for Luke and the pack, those days are buried like a bone. From his point of view, there's so much to see as he makes the journey from a dog pound to something more like a palace. A few weeks ago, the Shepherd mix was dropped off at the El Cajon Animal Shelter. Now he's one of many in a parade of dogs moving on up, being transferred from the old El Cajon Animal Shelter to a new $10 million facility just a block away. Director of Public Works Dirk Epperson says it's taken years to get the new building open.
It started about 5 years ago with the design and trying to get together all of the requirements that would take to build a facility, a state-of-the-art facility like this one.
And in the state-of-the-art facility, Not just playful dogs, but curious cats all receive medical examinations, spay or neuter surgery, vaccinations, microchips, and lots of love and attention.
We get to bring these animals into a new home, and that we have our employees that get to take care of these animals in a whole new way, a more efficient way, a better standard of care, and provide these animals with an outstanding facility that will hopefully help get them adopted quickly.
The no-kill animal shelter even has a grooming salon to pamper each pet.
They can bring the animals in, little door.
But even in the fanciest facility,
hey Brownie,
you can look into some of their eyes and see sadness. Luke's are a little anxious. Behind each glance is a story, and behind every inquisitive head tilt is hope of living the next chapter in a loving forever home. Jade Hindman, KPBS News.
The total cost for adoption, including spray or neutering, vaccination, and microchip, is about $80. An entrepreneur in Sacramento is combining art with activism. Trey Borden describes himself as a placemaker whose purpose is to reclaim and redesign unused public assets. Member station KVIE, PBS for Northern California, has this story.
I think that art is universal. I mean, looking at something that truly speaks to humanity in some way, like no matter your background, no matter kind of like what your life experiences have led to, most people can respond to art in a way that you can't respond to marketing, or you can't respond to like policy. Like art is supposed to be about who we are as people, and that's a common thread that all of us respond to. Often I'm introduced as an artist, and I used to be like, I'm not an artist. However, like as I've gotten more involved with this, and I've started to define artists as just problem solvers. And you know, you can be a talented artist who is a developer, a talented artist who is a photographer, or a tape artist, or whatever. Like whatever medium you can create with, like that should be considered an artist. So I'm kind of the interstitial fluid between the creatives and the civic community. So when we have artists that have creative ideas about how they want to change things, I help them realize that in some way. My first inspiration was my mom, actually. So my mom was very involved in the arts. She was a SMAC commissioner in charge of downtown Sacramento partnerships. And it's funny now, reflecting back on it, like she dragged me to all this art stuff, and she was so about making sure that the place you lived in was influenced by you. And if you didn't like what you saw, then like, guess what, it's up to you. And so that was something that I guess I took for granted somewhat. She recently passed, so I was like, well, why am I doing this? Mostly because of her. I mean, damn, Carol, like she truly, you know, somehow showed me how to do this. Because when you create a vibe and when you create something that is inclusive of everyone, then like that's the place where everyone wants to be. And that's kind of what's led to all of these projects. Take Beacon. Like this space has literally been vacant for a decade. And this is at the most busy intersection in Sacramento, especially now. I mean, especially with the arena, and always the Capitol's been there. If I visit from Chicago and I want to see like what's going on locally in terms of art, like this should be where they stop. It was really, truly about the community rallying around what it wanted to see itself become. Failure doesn't mean something ends. You know, sometimes stuff needs to end. And I don't think that's indicating a failure. Exhibit S made a lot of people very happy, but it made no one any money. You know, we have to start developing metrics that actually can measure what success means. You know, does it increase foot traffic? Do they find a very, very lucrative tenant? You know, does Sacramento have a more recognizable brand? Every experience leads to hopefully you learning some kind of lesson that's translatable and applicable to the next thing. And that's certainly been true for projects like this, where you truly are learning so much. I mean, these projects damn near drive you insane. Like, literally, we've been in this room and I've been like, I might be crazy. Like, I'm actually going insane right now. And I think that the reason that you endure that is because you're learning so much along the way and you know that you're very committed to the outcome. When people hear more opportunity for more people, they somehow hear less opportunity for me. And I think that that's who this is supposed to affect, is the person who's not expecting it. And to really think deeply about kind of like, what do I care about? Like, why am I doing this? How do you create a community that everyone feels like they have ownership over? Because that's when real change will happen, is when people feel like they can do something about the problems that they see. I think that, you know, in terms of the neighborhood perspective, it's about making people stop, making people feel like, oh, wow. So I think that it's about raising visibility, and then someone then can see how they fit into it, you know, who has the resources. Artists are like not afraid of work. I'm apparently not afraid of work. And I think that showing people what's possible is kind of the first step.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.